We're good.
Yes.
Victor, thank you so much for having me, and the Diocese of New York Clergy. I really appreciate you being here with me today. I want to just start with we're going to do a short review of some things we talked about Friday, and I'm going to try not to spend too much time focusing on everything we've discussed Friday. After the short review, we're going to do a Q&A session. I have some things that I'd like to talk to you about today. But since we don't have 90 some odd people on this call, I could probably tailor what we're going to talk about today based on the 8 or 9 of us that are here together right now. And so I will share a few of the things that I prepare, but we can also move around a little bit and talk about a few other things. The other thing I would like to be able to offer at some point in time today, if you need more, if you would like to talk about it, is any new or more information around the CARES Act. I led a webinar with Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina and 2 other individuals who are heavily involved in policy around the Treasury and the SBA and the CARES Act, especially around these PPP loans. And I'm getting some new information about what's coming through right now. And so I'd be happy to talk about it with y'all a little bit and address any questions you have. And I promise you that I'm the type of person that if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer to it, I will tell you I don't know the answer to it. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. I've got a little PowerPoint, and then we'll do a quick review, and then I'll start asking some questions, and we'll tailor our time together. So again, I'm Bill Campbell. I'm the Director of Institutional Advancement at the Episcopal Church Foundation. Before that, I was the Executive Director of Forma. I was also one of the creators of the Rooted in Jesus gathering that happened in Atlanta this past January. And before I was at Forma, I was the Director of the Annual Fund at Virginia Theological Seminary. And I also have a background as being the Youth and Children's Minister, Director of Christian Education in the church. So I've done a lot of different things in the church. I've seen a lot of the different ways in which our churches operate. I'm not ordained, although I do have a good amount of seminary training under my belt. And one of the things that I've noticed is that while I've gotten a lot of training in terms of what I will call secular fundraising, stewardship is similar but different. And we're going to talk about the differences a little bit. So today we're going to do a quick review. I'm going to open myself up to some questions from y'all to figure out exactly what directions we want to go today. And then I want to talk a lot about why this really matters and what's important, especially considering the moment we're in now. So the quick review, know your why. Simon Sinek, one of the great leadership writers of our age right now, had a great take on the know your why. And it's important whenever you're going to start a new online giving program or any real program in your church at all, even if it's not new, even if you've had an online giving program, but you want to energize it, you want to take it a little further. What's the why? What is the rationale? How does it tie into your mission and your values? And can you ensure that you're going to do it in a way that is tied into your mission and values, right? And so we spent a lot of time on Friday talking about how we get started. And that was some very basic, how do we get started? As in, we talked about the different online giving platforms. We talked about the different tools you would use for communication. We talked about databases. Are you using an Excel file? Do you have an ACS? Are you using Razor's Edge? And we spent a lot of time trying to remind people that if none of those things that I just said make any sense to you, that's okay. And that's okay, and that's fine. We spent some time talking about the problems we could run into. One that was particularly, that has always stuck in my heart around this is people's consternation over having parishioners go into debt to make a gift, right? So usury, which is something we don't talk about much in our church, but it is a problem. It is something that we should be thinking about. And I recommend that people do think about offering some sort of personal financial stewardship programs. And now you can do those online at your own congregation as you roll out something that's a little more robust. And then the main thing to really think about is how do we keep this about stewardship and not about fundraising, right? In a sense, if you're the rector or you're the associate and you're in charge and stewardship falls under your charge, you are a fundraiser, right? You are a nonprofit manager, right? That is one way of looking at this. I don't think it's the right way of looking at it, but it is a way of looking at it. And so you have to understand some basics about fundraising. There's actually, fundraising is really more of a science now than an art. There is an art to it. Some people do it more artfully than others, but there is a basic science around how many times you connect with someone before they make a gift, how many times you need to connect with someone after they made a gift to get them to increase their gift. And a lot of that information is readily available. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the power of online giving through a social engineering perspective a little bit later, if we get to that. That's based on a book called Nudge. And the link to that book is actually in the chat box. So if you open up the chat box, I've put a few links there for you. And that book, Nudge, does an entire section around fundraising and social engineering. And if you're not familiar exactly what I mean by those terms, forgive me. The book is written by two people who were involved with the Obama campaign. And one of the things that they were really interested in is how do defaults work, right? And so Nudge spends a lot of time looking at the retirement system in Great Britain, where in the United States you have to opt in to a retirement system. In Great Britain you have to opt out. And so they've discovered that, over 75% of people save for their retirement, whereas in America, we're running at like 40 or 50%. I think even maybe less than that. So that's where they started, and they apply this to fundraising. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So again, with the overview, where to get started, the links to this is over in the chat box. Jason Smith has written for the Episcopal Church Foundation. He runs a website called givingtools.com. Now he offers his own service there. It is affordable. So he's not offering an exorbitantly expensive service. It is geared towards churches. But he also, at that givingtools.com, and particularly that PDF that I shared as a link in the chat box, offers a really helpful way to get started choosing an online giving platform. But there are some questions, right, that you need to know the answers to, or at least feel like you can find the answers to, right? Which is, who's built your website and what system is it built on? Is it a Squarespace, a WordPress, that kind of thing? Who's managing the content of your website, right? And then this is important. Who's actually going to be receiving the gifts on the parish end, right? I think before the call, I mentioned that you could have the most tech-savvy rector in the entire Episcopal Church, but if you have someone who does not understand modern accounting software or just modern software receiving on the accounting side, you can't go with the most tech-savvy answer. All right. And then the other thing to think about is on a more generalized way, how tech savvy are all of the parishioners at your church? Are they going to be able to navigate a complicated online giving platform? Would they be able to navigate any kind of text to give thing? Or would they need a very simple, easy online platform? And again, we go to this idea of, we mentioned this on Friday a lot, things like Tithely and PayPal. Those are well-known online giving tools. Tithely is really meant for text to give, but they also have an online giving platform. They're easy to use, they're easy to set up, and they're very expensive, right? And so there's a trade-off, right? I suggested people think about using Stripe. Well, Stripe is wonderful. It's powerful. It's kind of the industry standard, but it's not exactly the easiest thing to set up, right? However, PayPal, super easy to set up, but pretty expensive, right? And so there were things we wanted people to think about. There's a trade-off that you have to consider. All right, so I see we've already got some stuff in the chat box. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can look at the chat box, and we're gonna open ourselves up for some questions, okay?
I have a question, Bill.
Yes, ma'am.
So we use Servant Keeper, which is a database management system, and they use Vanco. Do you have an opinion about Vanco versus PayPal versus Tithely versus any of the other people who will take your money?
No, Vanco's good. I mean, Vanco sets up. So Vanco is really good at you. It actually works with the banks already. And so what a lot of what you're doing with Vanco, and there was another one we spent some time talking about on Friday that is the name is escaping me. But what Vanco is doing is it's taking advantage of the fact that it is already a layered system within most banking software.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually Vanco really wants you to be using ACH or kind of bank, having your bank write your automatic checks, because that's the system that already does. And what they did is they added credit card processing to it.
The other one we talked about was Zelle.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Zelle, yes.
The advantage to Vanco, from my perspective, and I want to know what other people think, is that it integrates with Servant Keeper. So it would be very easy for one of my parishioners to make a donation through Vanco, and it'll automatically be credited to them in my database, which I'm thinking is, takes out a potential misstep.
Right, well, exactly. And I mentioned that on Friday, that if you are utilizing a database, it is nearly moronic to use a system that doesn't communicate directly with your database, right? If you have a database and you have the option of pulling something, even if it costs you more money in terms of fee structure, if you have something that can directly tie into your database, one that is going to be more secure, and I don't mean it in the sense that someone could steal the data, I mean that accidents happen. Human error is where most of those accidents happen, right? And if someone is in charge of having to take a gift and then manually insert that into a database, that is opening the doors for lots of error, right? For the opportunity for lots of errors. So if you have something that can directly tie into your database, that is much, much better. That is going to be a much smoother system and a better system. Now, the downside of that, and that's something that I found at Forma with using Network for Good, right? So Network for Good was an all-in-one system. It actually made it very difficult for me to understand exactly when someone made a gift, because there wasn't any steps, right? It just was so seamless that I often fell behind on acknowledgement, right? So personal acknowledgement started to fall behind. It required me to be very, very much on top of. Oh, hi, my daughter wants to come give me a hug. I'm so sorry. I love you too, sweet pea. Okay.
I find with Network for Good, because I work with them in another job that I have, they have an automatic acknowledgement system. So for the purposes of tax receipt, right, it's great, because people automatically are thanked, if you will, and acknowledged. It doesn't, there is lag time for the personal thank you. I mean, you can draft a email, but it's not the same.
Right, and in the Network for Good, let me just be clear, Network for Good, if you wanted to go from, if you were like, kind of like couch to 5K, if you had no online giving and all of this kind of is confusing and none of this makes sense to you, Network for Good is actually a pretty good option, right? It's a database, it's an online giving platform, it's not hard to set up. The problems with Network for Good are many, are legion. They hold your money for oftentimes a very long period of time. And again, when we talk about stewardship, right? So we're talking about Christian stewardship versus secular fundraising. The personal touch is the thing that has to differentiate us, right? If someone makes a gift, if someone gives, one of our parishioners practices good stewardship, then we also have to practice good stewardship by responding to them personally as well. I remember once I got into a mess of trouble at Virginia Seminary for talking to a group of seminarians, kind of I was like a guest lecturer for one of the classes, and telling them that pastoral care and stewardship are very closely related. And I got into a ton of trouble because it just seemed like I was saying that they're directly related, and I wasn't saying they're directly related, but there is something that we know, right? And those of you who've been doing this for a long time, if someone's giving you $1,000 a year and then their gift goes to $1, that's telling you something, right? Or if someone has been making significant continual gifts on a regular pattern, and all of a sudden you don't see their name come up in the giving list anymore. Their checks don't come through the collection plate. Well, either they're coming to church and they're not giving, right? So you're seeing them in the pew, but they're also not giving. Well, that might tell you that something has changed in their life. Or if you're not seeing them in the pew and you're not seeing any record of them showing up at perhaps a service you're not present for, well, then there may be something going on in their life as well. And so again, when we're talking about secular fundraising, we're talking about, especially in terms of online giving programs, we're wanting to see mass communication, good return on investment, right? So the amount of money you spend to raise $1 goes way down with an online giving program. In an annual fund style campaign, like a major university, they're often spending 25 cents to raise $1 or less, which is great. That's not going to be your ROI here. And that's not exactly what you're worried about either, because communicating with people who have made a gift is also part of communicating with your congregation, right? And that's an important thing to know. And again, I just want to be clear. I'm going to say this very clearly. People's giving does not affect the way in which you give them pastoral care. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying, though, that there is a level of communication that goes back and forth with people's giving to a congregation and so forth. Okay. Any other questions? And I mean, when I say questions, I don't just mean about what I've talked about. Are there things that you need to know about? Are there topics when you said, okay, we're going to talk about online giving? Well, this is what I was thinking he's going to talk about, versus whatever the heck is in my brain I want to tell you about. And so, yeah, let me know some of the things you're worried about, some of the things you're thinking about, some of the things you're curious about, and I'll see if I can help respond to them in a way that is helpful. Yes, please, Vicki.
Can I ask a question about PayPal? Because
Yes.
I've heard conflicting things. I know that the percentage it takes seems to change. It is a system we've been using. Is it a dangerous system or is it secure? How would you describe that?
Very secure. I mean, everything's hackable, right? I mean,
yeah.
If you have that, someone on the call on Friday was like, I have parishioners who refuse to use online giving because they don't want to put their banking information out on the internet. And it's like, well, that ship has sailed. So everything is hackable. And anytime, and church websites, by the way, church websites are a favorite, right? We often aren't using the most up-to-date. We're not updating our back end. We often don't even run secure websites, which is why often PayPal is really good, because it shifts someone to a secure website to make the gift, right? And so, in church database software, especially cloud-based church like ACS, Realm, that stuff is extremely hackable. The good news, though, is that all their giving information is kept elsewhere. It's not kept in the database, right? And that's true across the board. Blackbot has that problem. All of them have that problem. That being said, PayPal, well-funded, right? They are constantly updating their system. You're spending a lot of money for them, but you're getting a lot in return, and especially in terms of security, right? Okay. PayPal is a very secure system, not foolproof. I'm sure there's some 20-year-old in Ukraine that's got everything we're doing on PayPal. But that's true for everything, so it's better than most, right? Any other things that you're considering wanting to know about? I really am willing to kind of tailor our time together a little better. Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit about Facebook, like the birthday giving that they do through Facebook?
Yeah, that's Network for Good. That works through Charity Navigator, and Network for Good is the system that processes those gifts. I used to think that people getting gifts through Facebook was kind of a joke. I didn't think it really mattered. And then they released how much money they're actually raising on Facebook. It is a lot of money, right? And something I set a link to over here on the right that you'll see. I think Victor copied it and shared it again so that you could see it. There is a new Giving Tuesday coming on May 5th. Does everyone know what Giving Tuesday is? Does everyone know what Giving Tuesday is? Yeah? Okay. So it's usually the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. And it is kind of it's Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday, Giving Tuesday. And it is a campaign that almost, a large number of people do take part in. Most of the Episcopal churches at least acknowledge it and do something for it. Well, they've instituted a new one for the COVID crisis, and it's called Giving Tuesday Now, as in like people need to start making gifts now. We need to start supporting our charities now. And why is that? Well, it's related to this CARES Act in some ways. I don't know about y'all, but we weren't the people who got those loans, were we? We're trying. In fact, I'll just say in full disclosure, I just got an email from our bank. It looks like we may be one of the last people who got through on the last rounds. That's great. But there are churches that desperately needed this money and they didn't get it. Y'all need to be on the front line. And in fact, you'll see something from ECF come out for this Giving Tuesday. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to give people kind of an order of operations of giving. Yeah, I will, Robin. Thank you. We're going to give people kind of an order of operations of giving, which is 1, support your congregation, right? First thing you need to do, and this is what everyone needs to do. And if I were leading a congregation, if I were in charge of the stewardship program, I'd be on the phone with all of my donors who give. Hey, Kyle, long time no see. I'd be on the phone with all of my donors who give at the end of the year, and I'd be asking them if it's possible for them to make their gift now, for them to immediately make a gift. And then at the end of the year, ask them to do their end of the year gift. Because that is what needs to happen right now, is that we need to encourage and spur some giving. And so that's what this Giving Tuesday Now is all about, is trying to get people to think about what can you give to the charities now. And ECF's strategy right now, since we are an endowed institution, we do have a level of security because of our endowment. We're encouraging people to give to the parish first, to the Navajo land. I don't know if y'all are following what's happening out in Navajo land, but it is not good. And to other organizations like Canuga, doesn't have to be Canuga. Canuga's got a $2 million shortfall, could be as much as a $4.2 million shortfall this year. And they're not the only ones, right? Our camps and conference centers are going to be struggling this year. And so that's kind of the way ECF is thinking about giving. And our hope is that our congregations will do the same. We'll say, please support us. We need help now, and support some of these other things going on in the wider church. So you were asking, that's Matthew, that long scree started because you asked about Facebook giving. I find Facebook giving to be very helpful. It's very encouraging. It can also be really fun, right? You see other people making a gift to something. The important thing to note, all right, if you are listed as a charity and people start making gifts to that, you're not going to get all of that money, right? There are fees associated with that. Facebook takes some, and Network for Good takes some. And it can take up to 3 months for you to get that money out of Network for Good. Okay. Yes, Gina, this is a good question. So Robin, I want to go back to yours real quick. Few sentences in every communication from the church. So the example I think I came up with off the top of my head on Friday was, in this time where we cannot physically be together, it is important that you continue to support this congregation and the work that we're trying to do in our community. Please make your gift online here. And you could include, and it wouldn't be crazy to include a line of, if you're uncomfortable with online giving, please call X. And it may have to be your cell phone, unfortunately, but make a phone call, talk to a person, and have a person walk them through making an online gift. The woman from St. Bart's was talking about how she called all of her monthly, the people who just regularly give, and she helped them set up online giving. And she had like an over 50% success rate, which, by the way, is a very good success rate on something like that. And so what we want to do is, one, we want to remind people that we're in a crisis and that no one's coming to church, right? So this time is hard and we aren't together and you're not putting your money in the plate, and we're not mad about it, but it would be really helpful if you would give the money, right? So you want a lovely sentence that encapsulates all of that. You want a lovely sentence that tells them exactly where to go to do it. And then you want a lovely sentence that reminds them that anxiety is normal, anxiety is okay, and we're here to help, right? That would be my 3-sentence strategy, okay? So Gina, this is the brutal part of stewardship fundraising, right? And where stewardship becomes stewardship and fundraising leaves the station and becomes something else it lives somewhere in what I'm about to say. You have to ask for money. You never get the gift you don't ask for, right? So, I mean, everyone has like, it just happened to us the other day. Some guy who was giving us like $50 a year since like 1981 died and left ECF $250,000, right? We got that in January, right? That makes no sense to me, right? That is the exception that proves the rule, right? That you never get the gift you don't ask for. And so we have to be bold. The more dire things get, the more bold we need to be, right? And we need to be willing to ask parishioners. The first thing, stewardship, is how are you doing, right? So we should be on the phone talking to the people who give regularly, talking to all of our parishioners, but we should be talking to the people who give regularly. How are you doing? How are things going? And if that conversation is going well, right? If they aren't saying things like, well, I lost my job, my wife is sick, I don't know when we're going to make the car payment or the house payment. All right, well, if that's the conversation you're having, don't ask for the money, right? But if the conversation is, well, I'm home, but I'm working, I'm actually really busy, things have really picked up a lot, and I'm just still at home, I'm not traveling, my wife's work is a little down, or my spouse's work, is a little down, but we're doing okay. You may want to ask, like, hey, is it possible? You normally give a big gift in December or at Easter, right? We missed Easter. I actually felt like Jesus was risen very nicely, but we weren't together for Easter, and so can you make your Easter and your Christmas gift now? Is it possible to do that now? And if not, could we split it, right? So put them together and it's this, and then can you give me half of that total now? And just, and try to remember too, that your savvy donors appreciate a savvy ask. And that took me a long time to get my head around when I was first learning the ropes. And by the way, like, I'm 38 years old. I'm still learning the ropes around fundraising. I am just shameless. That's why I've been good at this so far, is that I'm shameless. And so, but when I was learning the ropes, understanding that savvy donors enjoy and respect a savvy ask. So structured giving, asking people to enter in some sort of structured gift, is not a bad idea, because your smart donors are going to understand the smart ask and are going to appreciate the smart ask, right? And my wife always reminds me, because of the weirdness of my particular Southern accent, I need to really enunciate the K of ask. So it's a smart ask. So yes, Tori, this is a good one. So most modern online giving platforms will encourage and allow for a monthly gift however someone wants to set it up. Now, the online bill pay is cheap. It is really powerful. It is very secure, right? So that's a great option, especially for people who are a little nervous. You can say, look, you can go inside your own bank account. You can drive up to your bank and tell them, hey, I need a monthly check for this amount sent to this place. They'll do it. It's easy, very secure, very inexpensive. And again, it's like using that back end bank to bank communication. It goes from your bank, it goes from their bank to your bank, right? Boom, boom, boom. Or sometimes it may arrive as a physical check at your church, which is less easy to deal with right now, but whatever. Yes, but in general, and I'll get to this in a little bit when we get to, if we get to some of the stuff I wanted to talk about. Maybe I'll just talk about it now. Monthly donors are the most important donor you can cultivate, right? It's for a lot of reasons. And I mentioned this on Friday. If you have someone who's giving you $100 a year, one of the easiest things you can ask them to do is to set up a $10 a month monthly donation, recurring donation, right? Then you're getting 120. So you've already gone up 20. Now, if you read Nudge, and I highly recommend that people read it, because there's all kinds of things that you can do with social engineering at your churches, especially when we start gathering physically together again. If you were to read that book and you don't go to your church for a while, so read the book and then you walk into your church with new eyes, you would be able to start seeing how you can encourage people to navigate the space by setting up defaults and signage that helps them move through the space in a more natural way. So I highly encourage you to read the book and to think deeply about how you might use kind of tenets of social engineering. But when they talked about fundraising, what really got me excited was that they discovered that if you have monthly donors, right? So if you have someone who's giving you $10 a month, one of the easiest asks you can make of them is to say, so it's April, right? So it's the end of April, and you go to one of your monthly donors and you say, in October, do you think we could increase you from 10 to 20 a month? If you were to ask that person, especially right now, hey, do you think you could go from 10 to 20 right now? The answer, the response rate to that is like a 20% yes, right? It's good, but it's not great. The 3 months from now, or 4 months from now, or 6 months from now, answer is like 80% yes, right? And many of these online systems, when you get that yes, allow you to set up like future, so you can see what the future are. And so as soon as you get that yes, you can go in and say, okay, starting October 10, we're going to 20, and you don't have to think about it again. And it just automatically does it. It's really smart. It's a savvy question. And we could time these things around the liturgical year. Hey, after Pentecost, do you think we could go up to X? Or at Advent, do you think we could change and move up to X, whatever the number is going to be? And people say yes to that way more than do you think we could do that today? And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of psychology reasons for that. But one of the most powerful ones is that we are all optimists in our hearts, especially in terms of our own success, right? And so we always think like, now I might be terrible now, right? And we all have the internal critic that we need to learn to shut up. But you might have this internal monologue about yourself that's very much now. But even if you have a terrible internal monologue, usually, not always, people who suffer from depression and mental illness have a different set of issues going on. But you ask someone who has a terrible internal monologue about where their life is going to be in 3 months, they're going to say, "Good, it's going to look great." And so what you're working with there is people's desire to say, "Yeah, no, I'll be in a better place in a few months. This will be easier in a few months to do." Right. And I just want to say that, like, when you read it like that, and maybe if you hear it like that, that may not sound like something that you particularly love to hear or be a part of. It is a good and joyful thing. People actually enjoy giving. People want to live into a promise, right? And so it is really good to get one, to build online regular donors, recurring donors, whatever system you use. And then two, one of the things that makes them so powerful is that your ability to move them up the moves management system, right? So moves management just means someone enters your pipeline in some way, and then you move them from a non-donor to a donor, and then you move them from a low-level giver to a mid-level giver, and then you move them from a mid-level giver to a high-level giver. And again, there's actually a lot of science around that. There's an artistic way of doing it, but there are metrics that you can follow to take someone from $0 to low to mid to high. And there's engagement strategies, and there's tons of books about all this stuff that apply for kind of a more normal time, right? So it's important though to think about, how do we move people from newcomer, right? That's our language, newcomer, or even probably more likely, been a member since they baptized their baby, and now they're here, and now they're asking a lot of questions because their child is asking a lot of questions. And so how do you take someone from that place to consistent giving steward of the congregation, and then to a more substantive levels of stewardship, right? And you meant I would like to note, never once Friday or today have I mentioned the tithe. Have I mentioned talking to people about tithing, about moving people up to getting to a 10%? I mean, in my opinion, I believe that that ship has largely sailed. Okay. Now, there are plenty of people who disagree with me, and I understand why they disagree. That doesn't mean I don't think that it's important, but it's just not something that's realistic for most people anymore. And so we have to be thinking about other things. I was recently, and I'm not going to even say where I was, but I was recently at a cathedral where the dean of the cathedral was actually, not kidding, wondering if pew rents were going to come back. Right? I mean, we are in a whole new world, y'all. Like, we're in a whole new world in terms of giving. I recommend an MMS beginner's book. So yeah, Gina, that's a great question. And I don't recommend a book at all. I would recommend that you use Charity How To, and sign up for some of their webinars. The place that taught me was CASE, the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. They're expensive, but VTS was paying for it back when that was easier to do. And so I learned through them. There are books. There are plenty of books that you can read, and you can find them, and they're going to be good. But what you really want to do, if you're really interested in like diving into the science around fundraising, you want to start talking to people who understand economics, not in the sense of like macro versus microeconomics, but people who are looking, so the people who are studying fundraising and kind of like this nudge book, these are economists, right? So they're studying the economy of behavior, right? And so when you go to a Charity How To or a CASE or Board Source even, you're going to be seeing articles. Harvard Business Review also does a lot of stuff on this. I love HBR. I keep hoping that one day we'll create the HBR for the Episcopal Church at ECF. We're getting there. There's a lot of this actually at HBR, but you go to Board Source, Charity How To, Charity Navigator, those sort of places, and what you're going to be finding is actually like cutting edge, current articles that deal with what are we dealing with now. And in fact, you go to some of those websites I just mentioned, and there are people offering webinars that say like classic move management system in the COVID era, right? And so you're going to be getting the current information. Now, if you need to understand like the basics day one, you'll also find that information there. Okay. Any other questions from me?
Bill, something that normally, and I think was kind of one of the big questions that wasn't asked on Friday was how to understand this into what we see small congregation, middle-sized congregation, and big congregation. When we are talking about implementing something online, and how we move through that as well, to see, like even now talking about demographics as well, like what works in a Latino Hispanic setting doesn't necessarily work in some other settings or demographics as well. So all of that, when you're talking about giving, what is your experience around that?
Sure. Well, we actually spent a surprising amount of time Friday talking about text giving, and that's important. And I told Victor as soon as we hung the phone, I was like, one, we need more information about this, and two, I am not the expert on this. So I want to say this caveat here for y'all as well. But depending on the cultural background of your congregation, text giving might be the easiest online system for giving for your congregation. And I just want to be like, I don't want to make overgeneralizations, but your typical classic Episcopal church, a text to give program probably isn't worth you doing, right? However, if you have a number of congregants who are Hispanic and especially come from south of the southern hemisphere of North America, or the southern hemisphere of the Americas Forgive me, my geography was not very good. Or you have people who are from sub-Saharan Africa in your congregation. Text to give is popular. It is trusted. It is a useful method for moving money around, right? And so kind of when we were saying things like using a system that the banks are already using and people are already comfortable with, right? So setting up an automatic bill pay from your bank to go to your church is something that I would say, in a classic example, without trying to be having too many generalizations, that a typical Episcopal church parishioner would feel very comfortable with. But when you move into different demographics, I live adjacent to a neighborhood in Arlington, Alexandria called Chiralingua, which is named for the town, I believe it was Ecuador. That entire town was moved here all at once, and they were moved here. It was important, but it, like all things, it was complicated, and that's this neighborhood is called that. We have a bank there. There's a local credit union, and there's a Wells Fargo there. But in talking to, I bank there because it's close and because I love this neighborhood. Is like one of my favorite neighborhoods in Alexandria. The bankers there will just say that, like, there are people who don't have a lot of trust in these banks. And so what is the most popular way of moving money around, even in that neighborhood, is through cell phones, through WhatsApp, through Venmo, and through other portals that they use, right? And so that if you have a congregation that is comprised of people where that is culturally comfortable, then that could be a really powerful tool for your congregation, right? And I want to say, like, I'm trying to be very careful about how we talk about this, how especially I talk about it. There are people who are very good at this, who understand this very well. Victor, I actually think you have a pretty comfortable knowledge of this as well. And I would say the guy who actually taught me the most about this was when I was on the road talking about online faith formation. Daniel Velez Rivera in the Diocese of Virginia was the one who just said, man, everything you said was great. It applies to no one in my congregation. And he spent a lot of time sitting down with me about text message faith formation that could be happening, which is fascinating and brilliant and really good. And so there are people out there who are an excellent resource for this topic. Mm-hmm. Do we have other questions at all? I mean, we got like 10 more minutes. My goodness, we're burning through time. Is there anything y'all want to ask of one another? Anything you would like me to touch on before we run out of time? So I just want to say a couple things then. All right. And I said this on Friday. In fact, I'm going to share my screen again. And
Bill, there was a question here from Kyle.
Oh, hey, Kyle.
On the chat.
Yeah.
Hey, first of all, hey, Kyle, how are you?
I'm well, Bill. It's good to see you, even in the circumstances.
Absolutely. So when I was working at VTS, Kyle was a student at VTS. So yeah, if your online giving platform has the option of people to cover the fees, one, if you can, this is going to get into some weird back-end stuff, but again, it's social engineering. If you can set it up to where the default is that they cover the fees, right? So that box is already checked, you're going to get a much better success rate, right? So if someone has to click on a box that says, I wish to cover the fees, people generally do that, right? They generally see that and check that. However, if you can have that box already checked for them, you're going to get, close to probably in between a 90 to 100% rate on that. That being said, if people don't cover the fees, you're still doing well. But it's helpful for people to cover the fees, right? I mean, it's really helpful for people to cover the fees. The example that I mentioned is like one of these once in a lifetime gifts that come in. During the chapel campaign at VTS, we had a significant donor who wanted to make all of her gifts using a credit card because she wanted the points. And so we had to quickly scramble to find an online giving platform that got the fees way down. And that's what we had to do in order to do it. And she then covered the fees herself, which was extraordinarily generous, right? So again, not the typical situation. This donor was particularly savvy and particularly adroit at this kind of these kind of givings. But so yeah, Kyle, I mean, there are like Network for Good allows the Eventbrite allows for the people paying to cover fees. Eventbrite is not an online giving platform; it's an online ticketing platform, and you can set the default on that is that they will cover the fees, and they have to select not to cover the fees, and that's what I suggest you do.
And I just found it on Tithely while we were talking, and there is a default change. So I changed our default to cover the fees.
Which, especially, Tithely and PayPal, right? They have the highest fees, and you're paying a monthly fee to utilize the service, and so you need to it's really important with those easier to use, right? It's not just easier for you to use; it's easier for them to use. But they're expensive, right? So you really want to encourage people to cover the fees on those. So, if you're using kind of a more difficult to set up platform like a Stripe platform, you're looking at fees at like 2, even sometimes 1.7%. And in that case, but if you're at 3 or 3.3 plus a dollar amount, plus I think PayPal is like 20 cents on every gift, and then you pay a monthly fee, or maybe it's 35 cents now.
Yeah, we have each gift, but Tithely doesn't have any monthly fee. So, so it's just it's like 30 cents plus 2.9%.
That's actually a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Victor. Yeah. Good. So yeah, we're recording. I know we're recording. So that's good. And we'll get all this out to everyone. Just something that I want to kind of just say for the record, there are millions of resources and books on how someone can incorporate an online fundraising program. But there has not even been a sentence written about how you should do online giving, do this in your parish during this crisis. Okay. It's really important to remember that. I can't say it enough. I'm saying this not just about online giving. I'm saying this about like everything, right? When I'm talking to people, when I'm talking to clergy, when I'm talking to formation leaders, when I'm talking to donors for ECF who are struggling in their own work, I keep telling people there is no playbook for what you're doing in this crisis at all. We've never done it before. We don't know how we're supposed to do it. When this started, like in March, in the beginning of March, I said there was no wrong way to do this. Well, now that we have these protests going on, I say there is a wrong way to do this. There is at least one wrong way to do this, but there's no right way either, right? There's no 100% correct way to do it, right? So, and that goes for an online giving program. You're going to have to feel your way through it, and you're going to need to make mistakes. If you don't feel like you've made mistakes, or if you don't feel like there's been some level of failure, you're probably not pushing far enough. And why I say that's important, right? I mean, typically speaking, when it comes to stewardship campaigns and congregations, when we're in the midst of some sort of crisis, I always advise people to walk gingerly, walk carefully. That's important. But this crisis, it's not like you found out your rector. It's not like the rector was caught stealing, right? This is a very different crisis. And it's the type of crisis that could literally take you from a growing, thriving church to not existing by the end of the year. It's vital. It has never been more important that you push the envelope, you communicate consistently and regularly. This is something I did not get into with 90 people on the call because everyone's got their own opinion of this. But if you look at the major fundraisers, right, the organizations that have major fundraising campaigns, how often do you get an email from them, right? Is it once a month? No. It's sometimes more than once a week, right? You are going to get pinged all the time by these people. Now, do you think that the Nature Conservancy spends a lot of time worrying about people unsubscribing from their email chain? No. Anyone who's grumpy enough to unsubscribe from the email chain probably wasn't going to make a gift anyway, right? Now, congregations are different, right? So you don't want people unsubscribing from your newsletter, right? You don't want people to not get information from you. At the same time, we can learn a little bit from these people who have spent a lot of money and time in studying the science of fundraising and thinking, hey, we probably need to communicate more regularly about giving. We need to be, if we're going to be running an online campaign and people aren't going to be showing up in our pews, which, by the way, remember the Pew charitable study and the Barna study told us that typical congregant in mainline Protestant church is coming to church once every 6 weeks anyway, right? So it wasn't like they were coming every week as it was. Some people were, right? Obviously, some people are. But even when this crisis passes and we get to some sense of normalcy, whatever that is going to be, I'm in another conversation this afternoon about what are we going to look like when this is over. And I keep telling people, like, we don't know yet. Like, we don't know yet. But even when we get back to some sense of normalcy, the folks who are not coming to church regularly, an online giving campaign is incredibly important to re-engage them. And so you're going to want to build up some muscle, I guess is the word I want to say, but some fortitude around being bold and making a big ask and doing it a lot during this time. This is a good time to work that out, right? What online giving platform would I recommend and how to change from PayPal to something new? Okay, so we got into this, Trevor, on Friday a little bit, and I won't get nailed down to one answer on this. I think go up on the chat box and you'll see some resources from the Episcopal Church Foundation and then the Fundamentals of Online Giving. It's a PDF from Jason Smith. Those two links go into detail what online giving platforms are out there and what they look like and which ones are good. And in fact, the PDF gives you a chart that you can use to compare different ones. And he actually helps you set up a way. He doesn't compare a bunch of them. What he does is he gives you a blank chart that gives you the information you need in order to make an apples to apples comparison of each one. It's really helpful. It's a really good exercise. And I go back to why am I not just telling you my favorite one? Well, my favorite one is the favorite of mine because it's cheap and I understand how to set it up. It's not my favorite one because it's easy. And so there are questions that every congregation needs to be able to answer. And I went over this briefly, which is what platform is my website on? Who manages the content of my website? And if that person is me, that's good. If I have to pay someone, $180 an hour to change a letter on my website, well then, you're going to want to be a little more careful about how you set this up. Right. So, those are the type of questions that you are going to want to be able to answer before you even go to those documents. That being said, I do have some favorites, right? We mentioned Network for Good. I highly recommend that for people who are just going from like couch to 5K, right? 0 to something. You've had nothing and now there is something. Network for Good is easy. It's easy to implement. It's easy to set up. It's expensive and you don't get your money right away, right? But again, expensive and easy tend to go hand in hand, right? If you're just trying to throw a online giving button on your current website, PayPal, right? PayPal works with, I have yet to meet an online platform that people build websites on that PayPal won't integrate with, right? PayPal is easy. You can create, literally by the end, before lunch today, you could get a PayPal button on your website and start taking money. Now, if you already have a database, right? If you have ACS Realm or you, the one that the deacon was talking about is another one that a lot of churches use. Most of those databases already have an integrated online giving system. You need to use that if you're looking for ease of use. It's maybe a little more expensive, but it incorporates directly with your database. At ECF, we use Razor's Edge. Our online giving platform is built by Razor's Edge, and it makes it really easy to bring a gift in, to record the gift, and to acknowledge the gift. Okay. Victor, I'm at 11, and I want to respect your desire to check in with each other. I think that's important right now. So I'm also happy to keep going. Oh, Vicki, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you were going to talk a little bit about the CARES Act, and that would be helpful. Please.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So, right, I think it's pretty much global knowledge that the CARES Act, 350 billion, sounded like a whole lot of money. It was not a lot of money. It was gone. They said you might be hearing on the news things like it was gone within a week to 12 days. JP Morgan and other major banks actually say it was gone within 5 minutes, which is just amazing. So you will also have heard that Congress right now is debating a bill to add more money to it. My wife is a lobbyist, which is how I know a lot of this stuff. And so I just overheard her on a conference call with some people from Treasury and other lobbyists in DC. It sounds like they've got a deal in name. I don't think anyone's shaking any hands yet. And what's been going on there is it's clear that we need more money in the program. I think we're going to see another 300 billion put into the program. And that's good. That's needed. They think that money will be gone in 2 days, right? So that's the current thinking, is that it will be gone in 2 days. And so the advice to churches is stay in touch with your diocese. This is technically a loan, right? This is a loan. So you can't take a loan without there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to take a loan. So talk to your bishops, talk to Victor before you do this. But you need to be on the phone with your banks today. You need to find out, if you put in an application, what's the status of that application? If you haven't put in an application, if they have not submitted it to the SBA yet, what do they need to do? What do they need from you in order to do that, if you need this money? And I want to just say right now, if you need this money is an important question, because chances are you're not going to get it. So how much work do you want to put into it to not get something? That being said, if you need it and you want to get it, you got to get going right now. When you hang up the phone, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. When you get off of this Zoom call, you should be on the phone with your diocese and your banks at the same time, phone on each ear, type of thing. Trying to get this going. This has not been an easy situation. And as we find out who's actually getting this money, already the reports aren't looking good. Churches are going to need a lot of help, right? And I think what I liked about I keep calling it P3. P3 actually means public-private partnership. So what I liked about PPP is it was it's structured smartly, right? The idea is, how do we get people to quarter 3, right? How do we get people to 3Q without dumping their staff, right? So even if our congregations don't get this kind of support from the SBA, from the Small Business and the Treasury, we're going to have to figure out a way to support congregations to do this one way or another. I don't know who's going to step forward. I don't know how we're going to step forward, but we've got we just recovered full-time lay employment from the recession, right? So, I really care deeply about the Christian formation world. Well, what's going to happen? Just take a guess. What's going to happen to all those Christian formation people when we don't have any money, right? It doesn't take, you don't have to have a degree in economics, right? it just, so I've got a lot of concern about this, and I've been really encouraging, even to the chagrin of maybe the canons and some of the diocese representatives around the church, that churches just need to get in there and just start trying to work on this right away. Right? Because it'll help. At least it bridges a gap, right? So you asked for some concrete information. The money is going to we'll probably see a deal come together by the end of the day or tomorrow. That's what we're thinking. Oh, everyone has to behave. But everyone needs to behave today. Everyone, there's not a one side that needs to do it. Everyone needs to behave today. In order for that to happen. And importantly, and this will be important to your congregants, we will see some money set aside for rural hospitals, for to getting supplies to hospitals, to getting supplies to doctors and staff. That looks to be what's happening. And then we're also going to see some money set aside for truly small business, not just hedge funds that have less than 500 employees and really good lawyers. So there's nothing, look, not judging, man. I'm talking to New York hedge fund managers sitting in your pew, and they are beloved children of God. But it turns out they got a lot of this money. And so we're going to need to, hopefully this money will be set aside in such a way that that won't happen in round 2. Now, the big question mark hanging over all of this is, will there be a round 3? So if this money disappears in 2 days, probably closer to like a week, but still sometime in that time frame, it'll be clear there'll still be more demand. And the question really becomes, how much money as a country, right? So we're now talking like civic wide, right? How much money are we willing to continue putting in to a program like this? And it's an interesting question, right? And this isn't a civics lesson. This isn't a politics lesson. It's just interesting. We're going to be in an interesting moment where a deficit of like $4 trillion becomes possible. And like, that just becomes like an imaginary number. And so I say all that, again, this isn't a political conversation or even an economic conversation. This is just one of the most fascinating moments in our nation's history when it comes to these sort of like economic decisions we're going to make. It's just it's what a wild program, what a wild idea. And it's just from like an academic standpoint, it's very exciting. From a personal standpoint, from within our own hearts, it is very frightening and very uncertain. And so why I bring all that up is that this is the stuff that's on the mind of people who work in investment businesses. It's on the mind of people who work in the banking business. It's on the mind of people who work in fundraising, right? So my livelihood depends on people having liquidity, right? And if people don't have liquidity, well, I mean, that's how the Great Depression happened, right? So anyway, all of this stuff is stuff I've been following very closely. And so I'm happy to answer further questions on it. If people want to email me directly, you're welcome to.
And Bill, before we continue there, you say I think the best contact that we can get around this in the diocese will be Canon John Perez and Elsie Hughes. I think both of them have been doing an amazing job in getting this information out. Canon Perez just sent the day before, or what was it, yesterday? He sent a survey asking people about this as well and where they are and what obstacle they have been finding. So that would be good to go to that. And I think it was sent to the deacon and priest lists as well. So if you haven't received that information, please let me know and I will be able to forward to you that email. But it's important to get a sense of where parishes, congregations are on this application as well. Those ones who went through with the applications, those ones who found that the banks were not working with them on filing this, and some of them that had the bigger challenges of not even knowing how to do this as well. So yes, it's important to get.
I'm sorry to say this. Speaking of, I have to go because I have to go deal with the Small Business Administration. So I appreciate all of you. Please, just take. I mean, we keep telling each other to take care of ourselves, and please take care of yourself. At the same time, be good shepherds, y'all. I mean, this is brutal. This is just brutal. I have a 4-year-old at home. My wife has a crazy job. My job hasn't exactly been calm. I don't know how people are doing it. I don't know how y'all are doing it. I don't know how anybody's doing it. So I love you all. I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for sharing all the information. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Blessings.
Thank you.